Hey everybody, welcome back to EarthSky. Today is Arctic Sea Ice Day, and joining me to talk about what sea ice levels mean to us, as well as to beluga whales and polar bears, is Alysa McCall, Director of Conservation Outreach and Staff Scientist at Polar Bears International. Thanks for joining us, Alysa.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
It is wonderful to have you here. So I want to start with these beautiful beluga whales. This footage comes from Polar Bears International's Beluga Cam, which is back for another year. So, Alysa, tell us about Beluga Cam.
Right, the Beluga Cam, it's so much fun. So we run other cams in Churchill, including, of course, polar bear cams and Northern Lights cams, and they're all amazing. But these Beluga cams are extra special. They're only running about 6 weeks a year, starting on Arctic Sea Ice Day through the end of August. And we have an above water cam that captures the beautiful sights of Churchill, and sometimes you can see a polar bear on it. But these underwater cams here that have the hydrophone so you can listen to the belugas and watch them. They are so much fun. You can see here the belugas are so curious. They seem just to be these happy whales. So we love kind of taking a beluga break each day in the summer and watching the cam, and even just having it on in the background to listen to them while the boat trolls through the river. It's really great.
Yeah, amazing. We've got some, let's say, stunning footage here.
Yeah.
But is there anything particularly special you've ever seen the cam pick up?
So the cam is helping us learn a lot of things about beluga. One thing kind of unrelated to beluga actually is we were able to discover a species of jellyfish that wasn't known to be in Hudson Bay, and it showed up on the cam. So that's kind of a neat scientific thing. And then we do have researchers running a project called Beluga Bits, and it's a citizen science project. So actually anyone that's interested can get involved. But they are using the camera footage to study the beluga pods. So particularly these family groups are of great interest to us, the moms with the babies. And because these groups will return to the river every year, we can kind of track them over time. So maybe find individuals based on scars or certain body markings, and then how the pods interact with each other, again, particularly the moms and babies. So lots of neat things to be found while enjoying ourselves immensely on these cams.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's a citizen science project. So how can people get involved, and what kind of thing would they be doing on Beluga Bits?
So we partner with the Assiniboine Park Zoo in Winnipeg, which is south of Churchill, and people can go online. It's at Zooniverse is the platform, and then the Beluga Bits program. So they can sign up, and every year Beluga Bits takes all this camera footage. There's a big video camera dump, and it gets put into the system, and people can help click through, and they can tell us whether the beluga is a male or female. And there's kind of a training document. So you get to learn about belugas and then help us sort them into male and female. Do you notice any individuals? Are there babies? And all that data gets sent to the researchers, and it helps them better understand the species and also publish research papers. So it really is quite a cool project.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely something to get involved with.
Yeah.
Especially now, today we're celebrating Arctic Sea Ice Day. So when better to start getting involved? So speaking of Arctic sea ice, how does sea ice fit into the life of a beluga whale?
Beluga whales are sea ice dependent species, as are polar bears. And it's kind of funny when we have our Churchill cameras, our cameras are live streaming at times where these species aren't necessarily interacting with sea ice. So it can be kind of funny to then explain that these species really do need Arctic sea ice. For beluga whales, one thing it really provides them is protection from one of their main predators, which is the orca whale. So beluga whales do not have a dorsal fin. They're a smoothed back whale. And of course, they're white, so they can camouflage with the ice. So this means they can get really up close and in amongst the sea ice, looking for open water when they need to breathe, but they really can live amongst the sea ice, whereas orca whales cannot. With their big dorsal fin, they would get stuck. So they kind of have to stay out of there. And then the beluga whale also has adapted within the Arctic environment. So they are eating the Arctic fish that are part of this Arctic ecosystem. So the presence of sea ice really is anchoring this whole kind of northern ecosystem that supports all this sorts of life, belugas, seals, fish, polar bears, and the people, of course, that live in the north. But sea ice is good for all of us, no matter where we are, in Canada, in South America, anywhere. Sea ice supports life around the world by regulating our climate. So it really is a pretty fabulous habitat to celebrate.
Right. And it's an interesting one because it's such a great thing to see the beluga cam and how it's very important to them to have this sea ice. But at the same time, Arctic Sea Ice Day is quite a serious matter because climate change is causing sea ice to deplete at an alarming rate. What kind of rate are we talking about here?
Right. Depending on how we want to look at the range of sea ice, we are losing, I've seen anywhere from 13 to 16% of Arctic sea ice per decade. So that's a really good chunk when you look at the Arctic broadly. And this year, particularly 2025, so far we are tracking on the same line as 2012, which was the lowest sea ice year on record. So this year will be particularly interesting. We know we are losing sea ice quickly. We are warming our environment too fast. All the fossil fuels we're burning are trapping a lot of heat in our atmosphere, and we just keep kind of thickening this heat trapping blanket. And of course, ice doesn't like the heat, so we're seeing it melt. And so these species that depend on it, beluga whales, polar bears, ice seals, all these species are impacted. But of course, we are seeing impacts across the globe, even outside of the Arctic. But really, keeping the Arctic cold will help keep our whole planet regulated. So one of the reasons we celebrate Arctic sea ice in the middle of summer is as we're all getting a little too hot, we're having some warm days. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. So it's good to reflect on why keeping cool is so important and why we need to keep Arctic sea ice across the north.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned that it's not just about the local ecosystems, which of course is a big issue, but it also affects humans and the global climate. How does that manifest itself from sea ice?
So we like to call sea ice Earth's air conditioner because it is so huge, particularly in the winter. It's so big and white and reflective. It reflects sunlight away from Earth and prevents that sunlight from getting absorbed into the ocean as heat. So as we lose Arctic sea ice, we're reflecting less sunlight away, we're absorbing more heat, and we kind of get this feedback loop. But if we have a regular amount of sea ice, then we are air conditioning all of Earth. We're keeping all of our climates cool. We're helping maintain that jet stream and regulate things as they should be regulated. As we continue to lose sea ice, we're seeing accelerated warming. So it really is important that we protect the habitat for people around the world, let alone, all the animals in the Arctic that depend on it directly, whether directly or indirectly. I think all life comes back to sea ice in some way, you could say.
Right. Yeah. And of course, when most people think about Arctic sea ice melting, I think they think about polar bears, right?
Yeah.
How are they affected by this?
Polar bears fully rely on Arctic sea ice as a platform on which to hunt their main prey seals. This is the only marine bear, the only bear that's adapted to live on top of the frozen ocean. It's kind of a wild way to live, honestly, but they really do need this Arctic sea ice presence. They are not a land bear, though they can spend chunks of time on land for sure, but they'd really prefer to be out there hunting seals. They have a diet high in fat. They really rely on that blubber. They cannot adapt long-term to survive on protein and carbohydrates. Their digestive system has changed quite a bit from their cousin, the brown bear. So it's really this high-fat diet that keeps them going on the ice. They camouflage, they hunt seals. When they're stuck on land for a while, they live off their own body fat, and they can get into trouble, whether it's finding garbage or seeking out different interesting smells, or they'll eat things like eggs and caribou and reindeer and things like that, but ultimately they need that blubber, which they can only get on the sea ice. So I do think people, for good reason, associate polar bears with Arctic sea ice. So they're an icon in a way, for sure. But it's also the beluga and the whales and the seals and the fish and all these other creatures that live more below the ice that matter too.
Right. And at Polar Bears International, obviously you're tracking the polar bears and their movements. Are you seeing big changes in where they end up at different parts of the year and their actions thanks to the sea ice melting?
We are seeing changes in polar bears due to the sea ice melting. So there are 20 populations of polar bears around the globe. Only a handful of those are well studied because polar bears are very difficult, expensive, and dangerous to get to. But the areas where we have good data, which includes the southern Beaufort Sea off the coast of Alaska and a couple populations in Hudson Bay in Canada, and then the Barents Sea population in Norway is pretty well studied. We see that the sea ice has changed quite a bit, and so we can see changes in polar bears. So one example from Alaska is that those bears are now having to swim a lot more than they used to, and we've seen some really massive swims from bears that can take place over a week or more. And the bear might lose its cub, loses a bunch of body weight. It's very energetically costly to swim that much. We've also seen about a 40% decline in that population over the last few decades due to sea ice loss. And then over in Canada and Hudson Bay, the Western Hudson Bay polar bears in particular, they're now on land up to about a month longer than they used to be. And that extra on land time really does impact their bodies. That's, reduced access to that blubber I talked about. So we've seen about a 50% decline in that population since the 1980s. And we are seeing that every year as the ice freezes and breaks up, the patterns are less predictable than they used to be. And luckily, polar bears are highly intelligent and they, have ways to figure out how to find food or navigate, but it's extra pressure on them all the time, let alone with things like pollution and increased human disturbance and things like that. So we're really putting a lot of pressure on the Arctic and the species in it.
Right. And you have hands-on experience with polar bears, right? How does it feel to get to study them up close?
I feel very fortunate. I have been, working with polar bears for about 15 years now. I've been able to do field work, so directly collect data and handle the bears. And then now I'm a little more behind the computer, but I was just up in Norway, watching the bears, talking about them. And I feel really grateful that I've been able to experience polar bears closely and been able to see the Arctic and be there. I know for most people that won't be an option. And the best I can do is try to bring it to folks in different ways. So things like this, or things like the live cameras, live streaming, amazing animals, doing the best we can to kind of feel like people have a window into this incredible world and kind of help build that link between the Arctic and our own backyards.
Yeah, it's so important when it feels so far away from most of us.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, but just to end, I'm sure many people in our audience will be wanting to do something about the sea ice situation. What's one thing people should do or take away that, if they want to help make a change?
One of the biggest things we tell everyone to do, no matter age or background or anything, is just talk about it. So that could include talking about what you're experiencing right now with a heat wave, or maybe there's a place you like to hike or fish and that's changing. So things that are directly important to you. Also polar bears and belugas. If you think that's cool, talk to your friends. Hey, check out this beluga cam. Spreading love and interest matters because humans tend to care about what other humans care about. So if my friends or family are really interested in something, I'm way more likely to check it out and also get involved. And then that sort of love and interest leads to wanting to protect those things that we love and are interested in. And then that can include things like voting for politicians that are going to make good changes, looking at things going on in our own community that we can support in terms of cleaner energy. Things kind of have this domino effect. And I think a lot of it starts with talking about it, talking about what we love. So that's a huge thing. And people can also check out the polarbearsinternational.org website for a cool Arctic Sea Ice Day toolkit with more ideas, things to share on social media. That also is a way to talk about it and more ways to get involved. And then just watching the cams. If people have time, I highly recommend. A beluga break is a good way to take a pause in the day, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely can confirm. It's good to spend the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that is a perfect place to end, I think. And for me to say thank you, Alysa. It's been fantastic having you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. This was great.
And thanks for watching, everyone. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. But until then, one Earth, one sky, EarthSky.